Our next speaker is Andrew Niewald, and before I read a little bit about him, when we were praying about who we were going to invite this year, I read a beautiful article, I believe it was in the National Catholic Register, and it was all about this Adoratio Foundation and what they were doing and helping parishes, well, he'll get more into it, helping parishes set up adoration, but also many parishes already have adoration, but they don't have a lot of adorers. So he'll tell you about this, what the plan is and what he's been doing. But we just had a really lovely dinner last night. We got to really know each other. He's got two beautiful girls with him. They're expecting their 8th child. And so we got to spend some time with his 2 daughters last night, and it was just a real pleasure. So Andrew Niewald is the president of the Adoratio Foundation, a Catholic nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering Eucharistic adoration. Adoratio Foundation believes the presence of a strong Eucharistic adoration schedule in a parish is key to its spiritual formation. Their mission includes launching Stars of Peace spiritual campaigns in collaboration with the Poland-based Comunità Regina della Pace to increase Eucharistic adoration, participation in parishes, offering assistance to parishes to implement Eucharistic adoration. And we all know adoration is, and Holy Mass, spiritual atomic weapons. So without further ado, Andrew Niewald.
Good morning. The title of my talk is What Will Save the World, Convert Nations, and Stop Wars. It's a quote by St. Mother Teresa. A little bit about myself. I was born in a small rural community in Beloit, Kansas. And I might ask for a show of hands, how many of you ever have been to Kansas? Raise your hand. Okay, a couple of you. Well, the majority of places that we go, when people ask us, if I ask that question, who have been to Kansas, most people ask 2 questions. One of them is, you can probably guess, is, do you have a lot of tornadoes in Kansas? And I usually ask them back, is that usually because you've seen The Wizard of Oz, right? But I'm pleased to know that it seemed like a quarter of the room has been to Kansas. I grew up in a large Catholic community. I'm the 3rd of 10 children. My mother was one of 13 children from a strong Catholic family that was raised in Kansas City. But she herself, as she tells her story, was pretty dead to the world as she was growing up. And at the age of 20, she married my father, who was a very nominal, at best, Methodist. So I grew up in a very Catholic, Protestant world that didn't quite understand why we were Catholic or why he was Protestant. And when I would ask my mother, why were you Catholic, she would, dutifully give me a lot of incredible Catholic responses. My father, when I would say, hey, Dad, why are you Methodist? Why are you Protestant? He didn't really know. Most Catholics in our area, and most Protestants even, they were just that because that's what they were. And so I kind of grew up in this world of Catholic Protestant in our small Catholic community. And it wasn't until really, I would say, my freshman year of college when I began asking myself some questions about, why am I Catholic? And I had an extra roommate on the campus of the University of Nebraska, where I had begun my collegiate education, and he was a very devout evangelical. And I think most of us know that evangelicals are deeply into their Bibles. And he knew exactly what he believed and why he believed it. I didn't. And he really challenged me in my faith. And I began asking questions specifically related to the Eucharist on why do I believe this, or even do I believe this? The Catholic Church calls the Eucharist the source and summit of our Catholic faith. And as our eye test, and as I've traveled the country and a little bit of parts of the world, I begin to ask myself that question. Do Catholics believe that this, on the altar, is the source and summit of our Catholic faith? And I remember being on the campus, on the parish at the Newman Center on the University of Nebraska, and there was a priest during a daily Mass ceremony. He was there for the first time. And as he was celebrating Mass, he said the consecration, as normally do. I believe this was a Tuesday afternoon when there was probably about 30 to 40 people there at the daily Mass. Communion went as it normally does in the Catholic Church. And after I received communion, I went back to my pew. And I remember watching the priest, after communion was over, he grabbed the vessels, the ciborium and the chalice, and he began to purify the vessels, little by little, as priests normally do. But this particular priest painstakingly cleaned the vessels. I watched him as he took, the linen cloth and cleaned it over and over. He looked at it with different light, and he just made sure every single particle of the precious body was purified and cleaned, painstakingly. And for me at that moment, it was the first time in my life when I asked myself, do I believe? Do I believe in the real body and blood of Jesus present in the Eucharist? Because I could tell he believed. I left the University of Nebraska. That moment so profoundly impacted me. I went to St. Gregory the Great Seminary the following year, and I just discerned the priesthood for 1 year and decided that wasn't what God was calling me to. And I finished my schooling out at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. Does anybody know Franciscan University? Okay, a number of you. I met my now wife there, but before we dated, I graduated from college, went down to Houston, Texas, where I worked in the natural stone and importing. So walking into a church like this and seeing all of the natural stone, I could tell you the name of every single stone that's in this church. It's absolutely incredible. About 7 years into my career down in Houston, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and they gave him 4 months to live. And I told you I was one of 10. I was the third of it. And at my home back in Kansas, there was 3 younger siblings that still lived at home. So I knew I had to go home and help my parents, or help my mom, after my father had died, to raise the 3 younger siblings. So not knowing what I was going to do, I called up our local priest that I knew, and I said, Father, this is Andrew Niewald. You probably know or are familiar with, my mom and dad that reside there. I said, Father, I have to move home because of, my father's death. I want to help raise my 3 younger siblings. He said, do you have a job for me that I could do? Anything, really, sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms, anything. Because I thought I was just going to be there for about 2 years. So Father said, well, you're in the business world, right? He said, well, why don't you come and fundraise for our local little church? I said, fundraise? I said, that's interesting because when I was in college, right when I was entering into college, I sat down with my academic advisor. And she sat down and she asked me, well, what do you want to do, Andrew? I said, well, I kind of grew up in a farming community, maybe something related to farming or agriculture. But I don't quite know. I like business. And she says, what do you not want to do? Let's start there. What do you not want to do? And I said, there's only one job that I know I don't want to do in life. I said, that's fundraising. I do not like to ask people for money. Fast forward 10 years, the priest says, the only job I have for you is fundraising. I said, okay, I'll take it. So over the course of the next 10 years, I learned the fundraising strategies, how to boldly ask people for money, how to market, how to give attention to something that turn around people can buy into your vision of something. So I did that for about 12 years. And then we were approached by a donor that lived just outside of Kansas City. And the donor asked me, Andrew, she said, my family's Catholic, we're of a little bit of means, and I have a little bit of money that I want to give to the church. She says, my family has never done anything worthwhile for the church, and we want to. She says, I like you. She says, what's your idea of what will save the church? Because she understood kind of the troubles maybe that were in the Catholic Church. And I said, without a doubt, I said, what I see within the Catholic Church is a disbelief in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. She says, well, how would you do this? I said, well, my idea, I said, is to put an emphasis on Eucharistic adoration. So that's how the beginnings of our foundation started, with a little bit of money. We named the foundation Adoratio, which of course is Latin for adoration. I'd like to speak to you a little bit today about not necessarily the theological aspects of adoration, but more so the practical, and what adoration, Eucharistic adoration, looks like in the majority of parishes. What we first learned was across our diocese, then across the country, and now we're learning the story of Eucharistic adoration all over the world. Because the question that Maureen asked me to speak to, what will save the world? What will convert nations? What will stop international wars? It's a profound question. Ask it to yourself on a local level. What will convert your local parish? Make it more personal. What will convert the wars within your own personal hearts and your own personal families and relationships? It's a fascinating question. I think you first, kind of like my academic advisor asked me, what are the alternatives? What do you not want? What do we know in the church doesn't work? Will education solve the world's problems? Plays a role. What about power? Money? Fame? The Catholic Church boldly says Jesus Christ. But what does that look like on a practical level? To me, it's the difference between what's a value and a virtue. A value is something that you believe. A virtue is something that you know how to put into practice. Similar to if I was to ask each of you, I bet if I asked for a show of hands again, how many of you value flying safely? I bet everybody would raise their hand. When they step on a plane, yes, of course I value flying safely. But do we have the virtue to know how to fly safely? Well, my goodness, if they put me in the cockpit of an airplane, I probably would crash the plane pretty quickly. We know that Jesus is the answer in the Catholic Church. But do we know how to put him into practice in our local parishes? I submit to you that Eucharistic adoration is, so to speak, to give you a basketball sports analogy, he's a 7'2", 250-pound athlete on a basketball team that's the coach has sitting on the bench. He doesn't know why or how he should play him. That's what we see most Catholic parishes implementation of Eucharistic adoration in their local schedule. I opened with the quote from Mother Teresa. I'd like to give you another one. Mother Teresa says, "To be far away from the eyes is to be far away from the heart. To be far away from the eyes is to be far away from the heart." Mother Teresa also says, all of us know that unless we believe and can see Jesus in the appearance of bread on the altar, we will not be able to see him in the disguise of the poor. These two loves are one in Jesus. So who are the poor in our parishes? I would submit to you, it looks different in every parish. There's 17,500 parishes in the United States. 17,500. Our foundation was founded when we read a study that the Pew Research Center did in 2019. Many of you are probably familiar with that study. It showed that two main points that I took away from it, two main statistics. It showed that of the approximately 65 million Catholics that are in the United States, an estimated 22% of Catholics come to Mass on the weekend. I'll say that again to let it really sink in. Of the Catholics that are registered in a parish, approximately 22% of them come to Mass on the weekend. That's incredible. That's incredible. All sorts of room for growth. The study went on to continue to say that of those that sit in the pews on Sunday, of those 22% of registered Catholics in your parish that come to Mass on the weekend, an estimated 75% of those do not believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Wow. We have a Eucharistic problem in the Catholic Church. A Eucharistic problem, the source and summit of our faith. We aligned, I'll continue on some of that data in a little bit. So we had this idea of using what God had reluctantly taught me in fundraising, of the approach to fundraising. Because let me ask you this, how many of you in your parishes have been through a financial campaign for something? Raise your hand. A lot of you. Maybe it's for a financial campaign for a new parish hall or this or that, whatever the case may be, a financial campaign. Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you have ever been through a spiritual campaign within your parish? Raise your hand. Wow, that's beautiful. Most parishes that we speak to, they have not. In the Catholic Church, never been through a pointed spiritual campaign within their local church. So that's what we decided to do. We found that we weren't alone in our studies. There was an organization out of Poland named Comunità Regina della Pace. This organization was founded in 2008 and had the idea, on a global level, to place 12 international Eucharistic shrines all over the world. And these 12 shrines would become an icon for a Eucharistic adoration movement across the world. If you ever go to our website, you can see the monstrances that they build. Each custom, they're all Marian in nature. And in fact, if you've ever watched Eucharistic adoration online, if you just type in Eucharistic adoration online, there's a Marian monstrance out of Niepokalana, Poland, that most people are familiar with. I see some of you shaking your heads. Yeah, it gets over 1 million unique visitors per month. It's been incredibly successful. The beautiful part about that particular monstrance is that it was actually envisioned by St. Maximilian Kolbe. Now, the unique part of that story is, if you're unfamiliar with that particular monstrance that's in Poland, is that Maximilian Kolbe had envisioned that monstrance, that very monstrance. He had journaled it, and they didn't find it until after he had died, when they were going through his personal possessions, and they went through some of his journal writings and found that he envisioned a Marian monstrance. And it makes sense, right? Because Mary was the first monstrance. She was the first person to receive the Eucharist. So it's their vision through these 12 international shrines to make them an icon for an adoration movement. So we found out about this organization and we immediately said, let's partner together, because we have this idea too of making Eucharistic adoration the norm across the world. So we began doing studies. And if you're a business person and you like statistics, you'll probably enjoy this next part. So let's just look in the United States, or even I'll just start in my own diocese, in the Diocese of Salina, Kansas. In our diocese, there was 86 parishes. We're a pretty small rural diocese. What we did is performed an adoration audit, a Eucharistic audit in our diocese for the bishop. I said, Bishop, we want to do an adoration audit. And he's like, what's that even mean? I said, let's just break it down and understand the Eucharistic health of our diocese. There's over almost 30,000 Catholic adults in our small diocese, 30,000. We estimate, or no, not estimate, we contacted every single one of our parishes and asked for just data. How many people do you have at Eucharistic adoration? If so, how often do you do it? How many people participate on a weekly basis? And what we found that over half, almost 65% of our parishes in our diocese did not even offer adoration. Not even one time a month. So we presented this to our bishop and he said, I just had no idea. Our study concluded that less than 6% of the diocesan members participated in adoration. The bishop said, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of room for growth. So we began to do studies across the country, and we called the different dioceses all over the country, all 180 some of them, and we asked those same questions. Do you have Eucharistic adoration? How many people participate? When's the last time you sought to grow adoration? Was there any strategy behind it? And the concluding part of that data just showed that there was just so much room and opportunity for growth. Of the 17,500 parishes that are in the United States, 51% of them do not offer adoration at all. 51%. Sit on that for a second. 51% of Catholic parishes in the United States do not offer adoration at all. 44% of Catholic parishes in the country offer it in some capacity. And we defined some capacity as little as one time, one day, 1 hour in that day, a month. So again, 1 hour, one time a month, the priest made Eucharistic adoration available. On the other end of that spectrum, there was, that would be 6 days a week. In some capacity, we define it. Parishes that offer Eucharistic adoration in some capacity to their parishioners was 44% of the parishes in the United States. Altogether, though, there was, listen to this, of the 17,500 parishes that are in the country, 5% offer 24/7, 5%, which is about 800 parishes. But the key part of this was the next level of data that we studied, and that showed that even in parishes that offered 24/7 adoration, usually less than 8% of the parishioners participate. And so what we have seen is a whole philosophical approach to adoration, even in perpetual chapels, that just show there's room for growth. All sorts of room for growth. And even in the mentality, what we have seen is we'd usually ask priests or bishops, say, Father, I understand that you offer 24/7. Have you ever sought to grow it? I guess not formally, he would say. Or we'd ask a bishop, Bishop, do you have a strong Eucharistic adoration in your diocese? He would say, oh yeah, we've got a lot of 24/7. But Bishop, do you realize that usually less than 8% of the parishioners participate at that point? I never thought of it that way, he'd say. Because what we're seeing is that most parishes form an adoration schedule and then they just put it on the shelf and they don't see it as a primary apostolate within the local church. So what our foundation is attempting to do is to ask that question. Do we believe that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our church? And if it is, Eucharistic adoration, I think all of us know that there's something that happens when you yourself take an hour every week that you commit to. It obligates you to something, and you have to sit in the pew and you have to reason through your mind and in your heart if you yourself believe. You sit there for an hour, right? You kneel and you pray, and you force that question upon yourself. Do I even know how to pray? And adoration provides that opportunity for deep, long conversations. I liken adoration to going on to a long walk in the park with somebody. You're able to enter into a long discussion with Christ. I feel so strongly that this is an opportunity of what the Eucharistic revival can look like in the United States. For every parish to rethink and reprioritize the role adoration plays in your parish. So what we did, I'll give you just the practicals so you can kind of understand, because that's what Maureen asked me to speak of. What we did was develop a spiritual campaign that really, from beginning to end, takes 8 months to accomplish in a parish. Most of us know and probably have experienced that when you've tried to grow adoration in your local parish, it usually happens one of two ways. In one way, a father will stand up at a pulpit such as this and say, hey, Andrew's in the back of parish. Before you leave today, if you're interested in signing up for our adoration schedule, please visit Andrew in the back. And guess how many people usually show up? Yeah, I see some of you shaking your head, usually one or two. Or it'll say something like this. There's an ad in the bulletin that says, hey, call the parish offices if you're interested in signing up for our new adoration schedule. So the strategy behind it is what we're trying to propose. Because what we've seen is that is the norm across the country when they try to grow adoration. The schedule is not prioritized, so what we're asking every parish is to rethink and reprioritize the opportunity that's there, because who we're trying to meet is those people that come to sit in the pews every single Sunday, that 75% of them don't believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. So our campaigns last, I said, for 8 months. The first 4 months is preparation. We literally give every parish the decisions that they have to make. We provide the training to them and make it absolutely turnkey for them. Those parishes just have to trust us on the process. The campaigns themselves, once they launch, they only last 4 months. And it's just a series of, what it is Father just gets up at the pulpit and says, hey parish, we're going to undertake a new spiritual campaign within our parish. We want to dedicate this parish, wherever you are, and make it a Eucharistic-centered parish. He provides a bold vision of what Eucharistic adoration is. The whole campaign in the course of the 4 months is just a complete strategy of marketing, catechesis, inspiration, and just education on overall about what the Eucharist is and why the church teaches what it does on a very practical, testimonial, and concrete level. To me, we propose that this is what the Eucharistic revival can look like. Other alternatives for the revival, of course, do make sense and do deserve some consideration. I'd love to see the communion rail here. If your church does not have a communion rail, consider that as well. Other things like that that can spark devotion to the Eucharist. But I would propose to you a third time to rethink and reprioritize the role Eucharistic adoration plays in your parish. Some priests ask, well, hey, look, Andrew, we have the Mass, right? We have the Mass, and the Mass will never be a substitute for Eucharistic adoration. Of course, he's right. Adoration is just an extension of the Mass. I think most of us know that. To give you a sports analogy, it's like an overtime of a basketball game. It's the continuation of the same event. As we walk through these campaigns, in our first year, which is this last year, we did these campaigns in 89 different parishes with incredible success. I'll give you a testimony of just one in particular. This one parish, which was our first parish to do this in, it had about 400 total families in the parish, 400 families. Father had adoration 3 days a week for a 24-hour period of time. So went approximately 72 hours every single week. Started on Wednesday and finished on Friday. So we approached Father and said, Father, what about a bold vision? Let's rethink and reprioritize what adoration could be in our parish. Let's make our parish a Eucharistic-centered parish. Andrew, no way we can do this. No way. This particular parish had started adoration in 2000. It was in 2001. They did adoration every Friday for 3 hours. Every Friday. They had 12 people participating. They said they had done things like pulpit announcements and ads in the bulletin with moderate success over the course of the next 23 years. But they did, over the course of 23 years, grow their adoration schedule to, they went from 12 adores, they went to 84. They went from 3 hours every week to 72 hours. And over the course of this 4-month campaign, they jumped 136 adores. They went to a 24/7 perpetual adoration in a parish of 400 families. And we use this as a model over and over and over again to give the priests confidence mostly. To say, Father, you can do this in your parish too. Some of the parishes that we worked with, truly, they went from, 2 hours a week to 96 hours a week. And our whole idea is jumping. If your current parish has, 3% participation rate in that first year, you'll see jumps probably up to close to 10%. And then the next year, jump it to 15. And just keep going and going and going with these spiritual campaigns, because that's what we can do. And honestly, that's what our church needs. A Eucharistic revival. To close, I'll leave you this analogy. I mentioned The Wizard of Oz. And if you haven't seen that movie, go back and watch it. But if you have seen it, you know that there's a key part towards the very end when Dorothy, with her 3 comrades, have always been trying to go back to Kansas, right? We want to go back to Kansas. And towards the very end, the good witch comes to her and says, Dorothy, you've always had the power. It's in your ruby slippers. Just click your heels 3 times and it's there. And I submit to you that the answer in our Catholic Church is not more pancake feeds in your local parish. That won't lead to a Eucharistic revival. It's needed, sure. All of the above are needed. New Bible studies are needed. New CCD programs and rethinking the theology that's taught in your local Catholic school that may or may not be actually Catholic, right? But the answer is much simpler than that. It's there. That's what the revival can look like in your parish. So what can you do? Rethink and reprioritize the role Eucharistic adoration has in your parish. Thank you for having me. If you would like more information about how to do this and execute it in your local parish, you can visit our website. There's brochures in the back, just a simple 3 trifold brochure that tells you our website. It's just adoratiofoundation.com, where you can follow us on social media under the same name too as well. So thank you for having us, and I ask your prayers as we ourselves move forward in our mission, because it's our desire to build a Eucharistic shrine that becomes an icon for a Eucharistic adoration movement in the United States, but also to experience this growth in every parish in the U.S. Thank you.